Hi, everybody. Charles from GMAT Ninja Tutoring here. Today, we're going to talk about the data sufficiency question type on the GMAT Focus Data Insights section. My goal today is just to make sure that you have a really consistent, repeatable, methodical approach to data sufficiency questions. On an adaptive test like the GMAT, the thing that kills your score is if you make sloppy errors, careless errors. Data sufficiency is a question type that's pretty important. And it's really, really, really easy to make goofy errors. Got to make sure you have a process in place that never happens to you. Also want to make sure that you fully understand what data sufficiency is and isn't. Let's launch in a little bit on the big picture before we jump into some questions. First of all, how important is it? You've got 20 questions in 45 minutes on the data insight section as a whole. 20 questions. Out of those, 20 to 40% are going to be data sufficiency according to GMAT. So that's 4 to 8 questions. So far, what we're seeing most of the time is 6 questions out of your 20, but there's a little bit of a range there. Now, the topics you're going to see on data sufficiency, any quant is fair game, technically speaking. That said, the emphasis of data sufficiency, of data insights as a whole, is not exactly on your math skill. There's a quant section for that. What this is really trying to do here is take that base of quant knowledge, nothing super fancy, but all of those same topics, statistics, algebra, percents, ratios, anything that you see on quant. And now we're just going to add a little layer of reasoning on it and see if you can understand when you need a certain piece of data and when you don't. So these are actually pretty heavy on logic. I would think of these as a reasoning exercise or a logical exercise first, but it's built on a little foundation of quant. So I want you to study quant first. If you have huge holes, there's a hole in your head where ratios go to die. You have no idea what probability is. You have no idea what overlapping sets is. I want to make sure that you study that stuff first, master the fundamentals of quant first, then go ahead and work on applying that to data sufficiency. And that said, really what you typically see format-wise on data sufficiency, it's much more often word problems. Nearly all the questions are going to be word problems of some sort or another. Yes, there's a math element to them, but it's mostly focused on giving you a piece of information, making it at least somewhat real world. So it's going to be kind of applied settings and getting you to think logically about what piece of information you do and don't need in order to answer a certain question. Now, you do have a calculator on the data insights section. You are free to use it on data sufficiency. But the goal of data sufficiency, it's not trying to be super math intensive. It's rare that you're going to use it. At the same time, I don't want you to forget about it. So it's there partly because they're trying to de-emphasize arithmetic skills. They're trying to make this mostly about your logic, your reasoning, your ability to apply math in a certain context and apply logic to it. Calculators there. Once in a while, you use it. In this video, I'm going to take you through 4 questions. And I kind of made a point of drawing up a couple where the calculator is helpful just to remind you it's there if you need it. If you're leaning on it a whole lot, you're probably approaching the questions a little bit funny. But again, it's there if you need it. Don't forget about it. Now, when you're studying, really important thing. So yes, I want you to really focus on your quant skills first, then go ahead and apply those to data insights in general. But if you're using official guides, and official materials are always going to be the best source of practice material, use the official guides from 2023 and newer. Data sufficiency, the format has existed for a long time, but they've made some tweaks to it for the GMAT Focus as of late 2023. So you're just going to get more bang for your buck. Your studying is going to be more efficient if you use the newer guides. I know it's tempting. You get an old copy of an old edition sitting around. Try to resist that temptation. Not the end of the world to do the older ones, but your studying is going to be more efficient if you use 2023 and newer editions. And the thing I can't emphasize enough, getting your mind right, really across the board on the GMAT, data sufficiency in particular, carelessness can absolutely kill your score. Adaptive test, they're trying to find the level of question at which you get half right, half wrong, roughly. If you make careless errors, the algorithm is going to go, wow, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. You see easier questions, get yourself into trouble. You get disproportionately punished for making silly errors. So I want to make sure that you're 100% methodical. Read the questions twice every time before you launch in. And as we go through these, I'm going to give you a process to make sure that you're keeping the statements separate, doing it really, really systematically. I never want you to beat yourself. If a question's too hard for you, the test beats you. Fantastic. Say, good job, GMAT. You got me. That's not what's going to kill your score. I want to make sure you never beat yourself on data sufficiency. And that's going to be the focus here today. All right, we're going to take you through 4 questions. Not going for super hard math. I'm trying to make this a little bit math agnostic. These are all more or less kind of algebra questions, not a lot of special skills required. First 3, fairly straightforward. I just want to give you a taste of what this is like, help you be a little bit more methodical. 4th question, I'm going to throw you a little curveball, give you something that's kind of on the outer edge of how hard data sufficiency questions realistically get on the GMAT Focus. Don't worry about that 4th one too much. Let's get you warmed up with a nice, gentle, relatively straightforward one. Go ahead and take a minute or 2 here. All right. Feel free to hit the pause button if you need another minute or two. For everybody else, let's jump in. I got a ton of stuff on the board here. Apologies for the clutter. My goal here with this video, again, don't think of it as a math video. Goal is to make sure you have a really consistent, repeatable process for data sufficiency. I want to make sure that you don't beat yourself and that you make sure you never make careless errors ever, ever, ever. So I want to talk about ways to do that. Least sexy thing you're ever going to see in a GMAT video, but I really want to get into this, make sure that you're really, really consistent in your process. All right, I want to start in the bottom here. If you've watched some of our other videos, you've seen variants of this for quant. Every single time, I want you to do this every single time. This is what's going to save you from making goofy errors. Read the question twice, no matter what. Not the statements, just read the question twice. And then I want you to push the question. What I mean by that is if there's anything you can do with the question itself before you look at the statements, do it. Where do careless errors come from? A couple things. One is not fully processing the question. Maybe you're answering the wrong question. Maybe you haven't taken advantage of the information they've given you. Source number two of the careless errors. If you start combining these statements prematurely, you try to digest everything as a whole, you can get yourself into huge, huge trouble. I want you to be super, super methodical. Work with the questions, take a breath, invest some time there, and then take these answer choices one at a time. Statement one, make a decision about it, wash your brains, reread the question, and then look at statement two. And I'll say more about that in just a moment and how this can help you. Third, check as you go. Doesn't matter who you are. Sometimes 7 times 8 is 42. It just happens. Sometimes we make mistakes on the algebra, translation, whatever. The key isn't, are you some robot who never makes mistakes? I can guarantee you aren't. The really important thing is you catch your mistakes when you make them. So I'm going to try to model that throughout this video. And last thing I want you to read one more time. I know it feels redundant, feels like a waste of time. It only takes you a few seconds and helps insulate you. Make sure that you're answering the right question. You didn't miss some piece of information in the question, didn't miss some modifier. X is an integer, X is not an integer, something like that. And really what you're doing is you read one more time, you're given that answer you chose a little sanity check. Human brain is one of my favorite ex-students used to say, his way of saying, no, I'm not just doing math mechanics. I'm just trying to think like a normal human. What's a reasonable answer here? Give it a little sanity check. Make that a habit. Every single time, data sufficiency, pretty much everything on data insights, pretty much everything on quant. Again, sounds like a lot of time invested, but adaptive testing, I can't say it enough. You miss questions that are easy for you. That's where the apocalypse comes from. Get your process really, really solid. Invest those extra few seconds reading twice, checking as you go, giving yourself a little sanity check. And I promise it's going to pay off for you. All right, here's just a distillation. For those of you who are totally new to data sufficiency, here's what the answer choices are. It's going to be that way every single time. So A, statement one is sufficient by itself. B, statement two is sufficient by itself. C, you need both. D, each alone is sufficient. And E, SOL, that's a little American acronym for poop, out of luck. So just saying that you can't possibly get an unambiguous answer to the question, even using both of them together. Now, if you're new to data sufficiency, this is going to become automatic for you really, really quickly if you employ a simple little thing. I always write ADBCE on my page, every single data sufficiency question. Credit where credit's due. This was popularized by Manhattan GMAT. I don't know if they came up with it, but 10, 15, 20 years ago, they put this out into the world, became really popular. We started using it. So it was really comfortable for our students. Now, the spirit of it is you read the question. We're going to push the question. We'll get into the specific question in just a moment. But let's say you look at the first answer choice and say, okay, that is sufficient. If that first one is sufficient, that means your answer must be either A or D. So that means I can cross out BCE. So if the first statement alone is sufficient, cross out that bottom row. A or D has to be your answer. Now, conversely, if statement one is not sufficient, you know that it can't be A or D, cross out that row and continue on. Now, what this does for you, the way I want you to think about it, I want it to help you get into a really good rhythm, make a decision about statement one, cross out a row of letters. That's your cue to wash your brain. Forget what you just read in statement one, reread the question, and then focus on statement two by itself. So again, let's pretend that we're in the world where statement one is sufficient. I've crossed out BCE. Now I look at statement two. If statement two is sufficient, then great, the answer is D. If it's not sufficient, the answer is A. I'm happy. If I'm in this world, statement one is not sufficient. I've crossed out AD. Fantastic. Then I look at statement two by itself. If that is sufficient, answer is B and I'm done. If it's not sufficient, I cross out B. And then I'm looking at them together. If together they're sufficient, the answer is C. If not, the answer is E. So again, that might seem a little opaque to you if you're brand new to this. Practice it on everything we're doing in this video, all 4 questions. Do a little set of data sufficiency out of the official guide after this. I promise if you start to employ this 10, 15, 20 questions down the road, it will be automatic. And then you don't have to stare at this anymore. You don't have to worry about it. It's baked into this. It'll make your process so much more streamlined. Okay, let's actually do this freaking question now that I've babbled for 5 minutes or so about process. Okay, strip this down a little bit just to make room on the screen. A coffee house spent a total of $240,000 last year on rent, employee wages, and wholesale coffee beans. How much did it spend on rent? Again, don't just jump into your answer choice. The single biggest thing you can do on data sufficiency. Let's work with a question, do everything we can. What's the question? I want to know, let's say that R is the rent. I want to know what R is. Well, what else do I know here? I've got this little equation baked in, right? So rent plus wages plus coffee beans is going to be 240,000. I'm always trying to pick nice intuitive variables here. Pretty straightforward here. I'm going to say R plus W plus C for coffee is 240,000. Okay. Now this is where the push the question piece comes in. I want to know what rent is. Well, is there anything else I can do that's going to get me rent? I'm going to make this a capital R so it looks nicer. Well, look, if I can get W plus C, I'm in business, right? Because R is equal to 240,000 minus these two. So I can rewrite the question. You can do it a couple of ways. If you want to be really, really mechanical and just subtract out the W and the C, I suppose you could. I mean, you could say that 240,000 minus W minus C is going to get you R. Okay, cool. If that works for you, fantastic. But fight for something that's intuitive. That's the whole point of data insights. I'd rather just say, hey, if I know the wages plus the coffee beans, I got everything I need. Okay, really small thing. Rewrite the question as many ways as you can that are logically equivalent. It seems really trivial. It's not a hard thing to do, but I promise that over time, this is going to help you a ton. It's a design feature of data sufficiency, always has been, that pushing the question pays off. It's going to help you recognize the relevance of these answer choices. All right, with that, let's jump into statement 1. Rent was 3/7 of the total spent on wages and coffee beans. I'm going to write my ADBCE every single time. So rent was 3/7. So rent equals 3/7 of the combined total on wages and coffee beans. If you haven't taken the step of pushing this question, you might look at this and go, well, wait a minute. I got one equation, one variable up here, or sorry, one equation, 3 variables up here. I've got one equation, 3 variables down here. Got a total of 2 equations, 3 variables. Hey, what they told me growing up was 2 equations, 3 variables. You can't solve it. Not how the GMAT works. What do I need? I need R or I need W plus C. Well, look at that. My W plus C is looking at me right there. So if you don't totally trust it, you could say, well, let me do a little bit of algebra here. W plus C is equal to 7/3, running out of space here, 7/3 R. And then I can punch that into here and I get R plus 7/3 R equals 240,000. Now I've got one equation, one variable, and that is very, very clearly solvable. So since statement 1 is sufficient, my answer must be A or D. I cross out BCE. Again, that's my cue. Wash my brains, forget what I just did on statement 1. I don't want to take it with me. It's going to pollute me. I want to be able to look at statement 2 in isolation. Read the question. Okay, again, we're at the coffee house, $240,000, rent, wages, coffee beans. I'm just looking for rent or W plus C. What do I have here in statement 2? Wages equals 7/13 of the total spent on rent and coffee beans. Is that going to get me what I want? Nope, nothing I can do with this. I suppose I could rearrange a little bit, but I'm still going to end up with 2 variables in this equation no matter what I do. So this is not sufficient, and my answer must be A. Okay, very, very common setup. You're going to see lots of this kind of thing on the GMAT. Word problem comes down to pretty much basic linear algebra, but I'm going to throw a little wrinkle in it for you, make you think logically, make you fight for intuition. Very, very typical setup. Going to see this with percents, ratios, straight algebra. And again, what I want you focused on, if you're new to this, I just want you focused on process. Always read twice, always push your question, check your work as you go, make sure you're not making a silly error. One more sanity check in the end. Does this actually make sense? And sure, it makes sense. Hey, if I know that rent is 3/7 of the total spent on everything else, then I know the percentage that rent was of the total, and off I go. I can solve this. Fantastic. All right, one more question. This one might be a little tougher for some of you guys. Go ahead and take a minute. All right, hit that pause button if you need more time. Okay. As always, want to read that question twice, be super, super systematic. That's what's going to insulate you against trouble. Here you can buy a box of K kilos of durian. Delicious stuff, smells awful. Banned in Singapore, really interesting fruit. You can buy K kilos of it. Buy a box of K kilos for $23.75, or you can buy K kilos individually for $1.38 each. And we want to know, is it going to cost him more to buy the box than it is to buy those K kilos of durian individually? All right, as always, take a breath. We want to avoid those careless errors. Take your time, read the question twice, process it, do anything you can to translate it really cleanly. So pretty easy translation here. We want to know if the box, which costs $23.75, we want to know if that costs more than $1.38 times the K kilos that are in that box. Small thing you'll see me do every single time. If it's a question, I'm going to keep a Q here and a question mark here. Sounds really superficial, sounds kind of silly, but that helps keep me straight because sometimes they give you facts in that question stem. I don't want to mix up a fact and a question. So if it's a question, I'm going to label it religiously as that. Again, adaptive test, careless errors are the killer, especially on a shortened test like GMAT Focus. So these little things, if they save you an error or two here or there, worth every bit of it. Okay. From here, the obvious thing to do is just divide out by 138. Really nice thing. You've got a calculator on Data Insights. You don't on the quant section, but for Data Sufficiency on Data Insights, you do on the GMAT Focus. Use it. You're not going to need it very often. There's not a ton of hard arithmetic. This is one of those cases. Maybe 2, 3, 4 questions per Data Insights section of 20. Maybe you'll use your calculator 3 or 4 times max. This is one of those cases where, yeah, sure, might as well. I'm going to divide both sides by 138. I get about 17.21 here. Small thing that, again, personal taste, you don't have to do this. My personal taste, I find it easier to think about this if I've got the K on this side. I'm just going to rearrange it one more time for my brain. This is saying, is K less than 17.21? And that's my question. Does that actually make sense? We want to know if the box is going to be more expensive than buying them individually at 138 per kilo. Well, yeah, if there's less than 17.21 kilos in there, it's a better idea to just buy those individually if the box really doesn't have that much fruit in it relatively. So this makes sense. I want to know, is K, is the number of kilos in the box less than 17.21? Cool, great. All right, going to write up my ADBCE as always. And let's get in here. It would cost $28.98 to buy K plus 4.5 kilos at that price of $1.38 per kilo. Not obvious to me what that means. Let's go ahead and translate. So $28.98 would be equal to K plus 4.5 times that $1.38 per kilo. And guess what? This is going to give me an actual value for K. So I'm going to divide up by 1.38 again. What do I get there? Again, calculator's your friend here. Turns out that we get 21 is equal to K plus 4.5. So K here is going to be equal to 16.5. Nice and straightforward, exactly what you want. You get an exact value for K. Life is beautiful. That value happens to be less than 17.21. Awesome. Statement 1 is sufficient. I can cross out BCE. Wash my brains. Again, what am I looking for? I want to know if the box is going to be more expensive than buying those same K kilos individually. Remind myself once I did the arithmetic. Turns out that we're being asked is K less than 17.21. Going to forget about this. Wash my brains. Look at this in isolation. The box contains less than 17 kilos. There it is on a silver platter. I'm happy. Great. Answer is D. Okay. One more question that's fairly gentle. And then the fourth and final one in this video, I might melt your brain a little bit. So go ahead and take a moment here on this guy. All right, if you need more time, hit that pause button. Should be a fairly quick question, not necessarily an easy one, but a fairly quick one that's very, very typical of data sufficiency on the data insights section. Often more about logic than anything else. All right, let's jump in. As always, want to do everything we can with the question. Little bit slipperier here on this third one, kind of on purpose. So every customer ordered either 1 or 2 scoops. If P is the total number of scoops ordered, we want to know, is P odd? All right, what can I do here? Not necessarily a ton, but what's this business of 1 or 2 scoops? I suppose I could say P, the total number of scoops. There's only 2 kinds of customers. There's customers that only ordered 1 scoop. So the total number of scoops ordered by those guys is just going to be 1 times the number of customers. So let C1 be number of customers who ordered only 1 scoop. And now the good people who are gluttons ordered 2 scoops each. I'm in that camp. 2 scoops times the number of customers that ordered 2. Now, but to be honest with you, I don't love this. I don't love making this too algebraic. I don't love that I suddenly turned this question that only had 1 variable turn into 3 variables. Not necessarily awesome, but at least it's something. I've done something. Now, the question is, can I anchor that to some sort of intuition? And can that take me anywhere? I want to know, I don't want to know what is P. I just want to know, is P odd? Now, if we think through this intuitively a little bit, now we've got something. Why? Well, this right here, 2 times the number of customers who ordered 2 scoops each, well, that's going to give me an even number no matter what. So if I want to know whether P's odd, all I really need to know is that. So I can translate the question here. So if the question is P odd? Well, I can do better than that. All I want to know is C1 odd, or better still, the number of single scoop customers. Is that odd? That's it. Now we've got a much simpler question, much more intuitive. Nothing else I can really do with this, but let's see where that takes us. Get my little ADBCE written in here. As always, statement 1, the shop served 604 total customers. Now, does that help me know whether or not the number of single scoop customers was odd? No, because I've got an even number for the total number of customers. So it could be that the single scoop customers was odd and so was the double scoops customers, or it could be that both of those were even. So since it's possible for the single scoop customers to be either odd or even, I know that this is not sufficient. So we can get rid of AD. And check this out on statement 2. The shop served 371 single scoops. So now we know for sure that's an odd number, and that's all we wanted. So B is going to be the right answer here, and we are done. Again, very, very typical sort of feel to these data sufficiency questions. Not a lot of algebra here. You're going to be rewarded for pushing the question, but at the end of the day, mostly anchoring yourself in the intuition. Again, just watch your back, always read twice, push your question. Good things are going to happen when you do that. And again, does this make sense? Human brain sanity check at the end here. Does it make sense that that's going to give you the answer? Yeah, you bet. So double scoops, that's even, no matter what. Single scoops, that's odd here. So my total number of scoops sold must be odd. Easy enough. All right. 4th and final question here. Again, I think I promised you at the beginning of the video, I'm not going to melt your face off with crazy, crazy, crazy hard questions. That said, I think this next one is about as hard as they get on data sufficiency. Could you see something a little bit tougher? Possibly. In all honesty, if you feel comfortable with what you've seen in these first 3 questions, you're doing just fine. You're in really good shape. This last one might be a challenge for some of you. A little bit more intricacy to it, but even then, not super hard mathematically, just has a few little nuances. Go ahead and take a couple of minutes, and good luck to you. All right, if you're struggling on this one, the good news is you're very unlikely to see anything any tougher than this on data sufficiency. Is it possible you could see something a little harder? Possible. Very, very few questions are going to be rougher than this. So that's good news. It's not that it's so complicated mathematically, but it's pretty typical of the harder data insights questions where they give you kind of some information, they give you 4 different pieces of information. It's hard to figure out exactly how they're related. That's why I'm such a big believer in pushing the question on data sufficiency. Here you've got a bunch of little bits and pieces. Once you make sense of it, the question's not so bad. But at first glance, it's like, whoa, I just had to read this whole paragraph and I'm not sure what to do next. All right. We know the cost for manufacturing these pretzels is $70,000 plus 25% of revenue over the course of the year. So I'm just going to write that out. C for cost. Cost is equal to 70,000 plus 0.25 times R for revenue. Again, just trying to get my head around the information given in the question at first. We know the bakery sold every pretzel. Hard for me to tell at first why that's important. We'll see it in a minute. Didn't make a profit. And we want to know something about the quantity. Did they sell fewer than 18,000 pretzels? All right. This business of not making a profit, that's kind of where the heart of this is. We know that if it didn't make a profit, then either cost and revenue are the same, in which case it broke even, or cost is greater than the revenue, in which case it made a loss. So let's use that here. So we can say that this cost, the $70,000 plus 0.25 times revenue, that's got to be greater than or equal to R. Now this is going to clean up nicely. We got something here. We can subtract out the 0.25R. We get 70,000 is greater than or equal to 0.75R. Again, you'll notice in this video, I gave you a bunch of questions where a calculator comes in handy. Not always going to be the case. You could very easily do 100 data sufficiency questions, not touch your calculator, be okay. But then every once in a while, it's going to save you 20 seconds, 30 seconds here or there. Go ahead and use it. Part of what I'm doing in this video, I just want to remind you that it's still there. So we do the division, divide out the 0.75, and what do we get? We get that revenue must be less than or equal to, you get kind of an ugly number here, 93,333 and 33 cents, but this is close enough here. The 33 is going to repeat. Okay, cool. Now what do I do with this thing? Questions ask me about the number of pretzels sold. Well, now I suppose I could just say, well, what's revenue? It's price times quantity. And that's where this little piece of information that felt irrelevant at first, the bakery sold every pretzel sold. Okay, so I don't have to worry about pretzels getting lost anywhere. I can just say, well, average price times the quantity of pretzels sold has to be less than this 93,333. And my question here is just, is that quantity less than 18,000? Do I love this? Nah, I don't feel great about this, but at least I've got my head around all the information. I've got some feel for why it's there. I've got the question written nice and cleanly. And I've got this pretty key piece of number that's this pretty key number that's a pretty nice bit of intuition. All right, I know the revenue must be less than 93,300 and some odd dollars. All right, I got something there. I got a starting point. Didn't take us that long to do this work. Off we go. Average pretzel price was greater than $6. Now, mathematically, what makes it a little bit tricky, you could argue, is we know that the price is greater than $6. Okay, and what are we interested in? We're interested in getting at that quantity. We know that the price times the quantity has to be less than this 93,333. Now, if you're getting too mechanical and you go, oh, well, what's the rule for dividing out inequalities? You're kind of barking up the wrong tree. If that works for you, knock yourself out. But better, stronger, more consistent with what they're trying to test on data insights, data sufficiency on the GMAT Focus is, yeah, what if I just kind of think about this logically? I've got a floor on the revenue, right? I'm sorry, I forgot my, that it's less than or equal to. So this number right here, this is your max revenue, barring a few cents there. And this is my minimum price, minimum average revenue. So if I just divide out these two numbers, that's going to give me sort of a ceiling, a maximum number of pretzels sold. And again, if you just think about that intuitively, this is the most money that they possibly could have made in terms of just their revenue. That's the minimum price they sold each pretzel for. So divide those out. What do I get? I get kind of an ugly number there. So if I divide those out, I get kind of this Q equals 15,000 and something, 15,500. I think we're going to get a bunch of repeating numbers. It doesn't really matter. I can just say that. It's roughly 15,500. It doesn't really matter because no matter what, there is absolutely no way we get to 18,000 pretzels here. It must be the case that this poor bakery sold well under 18,000, sold at most 15,500 and some odd. So that's it. That's sufficient. Even though it's hard for me to pin down an actual number, it feels a little bit fiddly with all these inequalities flying everywhere. But if you apply a little bit of logic, they're going to reward you for it. I don't even have to do very much math. Don't even really need the calculator. I know that for sure this poor bakery is selling less than 18,000 pretzels. BCE is out. And then statement 2, total pretzel revenue at this bakery was less than $90,000. Pretzels, tough business. Who knew? Well, we already knew that. So we knew that the revenue was less than 93,000 and some odd dollars. So this isn't giving us any new information at all. Answer is not D. It must be A, and that's it. All right, guys, if you enjoyed this, please hit the like button. Please subscribe. Helps other viewers to find us. Friendly reminder, again, data sufficiency, all about process. Keep yourself clean. Key to an adaptive test. Don't miss the easy ones. Don't miss the easy ones. Don't miss the easy ones. They're not going to punish you that hard on the math itself on data sufficiency. Every once in a while, I'm sure you can see some probability overlapping sets. You're going to see some variety there. Don't get me wrong. They're rarely going to make it all that tough on you. Keep yourself anchored to your human brain. Think logically, think intuitively, think in terms of the real world. Push your question, read twice, really watch your steps as you go, and you're going to be more than fine on these questions. All right. That's it for today. Thank you so much for watching, everybody, and we'll see you next time.